Welcome back to SuperWest on Sundays, everybody. We got the same group back as last year. I'm joined by assistant editor for SuperWest Sports, Dane Miller, and senior writer Stephen Vilardo, who also runs the stat thing. I'm Nick Bartlett. I'm Nick Bartlett, and I'm also a senior writer here at SuperWest Sports as well. And the three of us, you guessed it, we make up SuperWest on Sundays. So thank you for joining me, Steve and Dane.
Good to be here.
And for our first preseason episode, we're going to preview UNLV. You guys got our attention last year with that pretty solid season. We're going to see if Barry Odom can continue the success he had from last year. 9 wins and the Rebels' first winning season since 2013. And all you guys out there, I know you follow us on Twitter. Be sure to like and subscribe on YouTube. You know what I am saying, sirs. All right, guys. Without further ado, I'll get to the questions. We're going to talk again UNLV, give a little preview, and maybe touch on the Mountain West a tiny bit. So I'm going to get the first question started and then kick it out to Dane and Steve. So first question, either you can chime in when I'm done. UNLV is a complete roster, but still is question marks at the quarterback position. Do you feel Matthew Sluka can replicate the same sort of success that Jaden Maeva had last season?
Well, I'll start with this one. I'm not sure. I mean, Maeva had an outstanding campaign, obviously, but and Sluka's, coming from Holy Cross, I believe, spent 4 years there, put up good numbers there, but it's a different ballgame when you're jumping to from up to the FBS. But at the same token, Maeva came in and I mean, he wasn't even supposed to be the starter last year at the start of the year. I mean, it was reluctantly kind of put in there after some injuries. So Maeva came kind of out of nowhere too. So I mean, you could kind of see. I wouldn't be shocked necessarily if Sluka stepped up and performed really well, putting up the numbers. I mean, I'm skeptical he could kind of match what Maeva did because he just had an all world season last year and was just phenomenal. But yeah, I mean, Maeva came from relatively obscurity last year and stepped in and led him to the Mountain West Championship game. So I with the talent around him, I don't know that they should see too much of a drop off either way.
Yeah, for me, the quarterback question is the biggest issue with UNLV. I was preparing my notes, and the first thing I write is quarterback question. And so we all know the importance that position plays to the success of a team. You need to have a good quarterback. If you don't have a good quarterback, you're probably not going to win a lot of games. So the pressure is on for the Holy Cross transfer to perform. And you can't really judge it until you see it. I mean, who knows what he's going to do? Maybe he comes and, the transition to the Mountain West isn't that, major for him and he goes and crushes it. But until that happens, you can't really, it's hard to handicap him. You don't really know what type of season UNLV is going to have coming off 9 wins. That seems like a lot for UNLV. You tend to think of UNLV not really as a football school, maybe as a basketball school a little bit from their success in the 90s. And now I think the perspective is changing around the program, and there's a lot of expectations, I guess, internally. I saw an article in the Las Vegas Sun that was projecting a 6-6 record, and I think we'll talk about where we think they're going to be this season, but that seems low for me based on what happened last year. I know there's the quarterback question, but they got a lot of really good players. I mean, I did my rankings. For me, they got the number 3 linebacker in the West, Jackson Woodard, really good player, the key of the defense. Ricky White is my number 2 wide receiver in the West. And then Jacob DeJesus is my number 2 returner in the West. So they've got a lot of pieces. And Tiger Shanks is my number 11 offensive lineman. So they've got players that are good. Like UNLV has good players. And whether or not they can put it all together, I think is going to come down to the quarterback. So we're just going to have to see how that turns out. And really, I think their season is going to, come and go on the play of the quarterback.
And Dane, you talked about the historical kind of stuff, and I think I don't have it exactly in front of me. I think last year was their first bowl game since 2010, but it was definitely their best all-around season since '84. So I mean, you're going all the way back to 1984 when it was Randall Cunningham and who was the running Ickey Woods doing damage. So that's the last time UNLV had any success comparable to the last year. So long way.
I had no idea Randall Cunningham went to UNLV. I just wanted that was. I know I'm not gonna.
Really? All right.
Zero. Like that wasn't even a 0.1. That seriously, wow, that's new news to me. But so kind of like Dane touched on before I go on a tangent here. Essentially, it does depend on the quarterback. Again, you're looking at Sluka. Again, we haven't seen it at this level. Just like Dane said, but at Holy Cross, threw for close to 6,000 yards, 59 touchdowns, and also 3,600 rushing yards and 38 scores in 4 years. So I mean, that's a absolute that's just phenomenal. I mean, you're talking what's that like 59 plus 38? That's let's see, 87 touchdowns if I'm correct. I think I'm off by one number, but close enough. So an absolute dominant force at Holy Cross. So as you know, I think we kind of led into it a little bit, but the second question here is going to be how good is the rest of this offense? We got Dane said Ricky White. You got Jaden Thomas looking like a pretty solid halfback returning. And just even you could even talk about like a Texas transfer, Casey Kane, who's a solid, potentially a solid third option receiver. So what are your guys' thoughts on this offense? Any players I'm missing? Any guys you want to highlight?
I mean, we touched on Ricky White there. I also had him as my number two kind of receiver in our area, or maybe even a 1A because he's that good. He put up All American numbers last year, and I don't. I mean, obviously, quarterback play will affect him a lot, but I don't see much drop off there at all. DeJesus is just lightning rod, and I mean he's a threat to go the distance every time he touches the ball, whether it's on offense or special teams. Janane Thomas is a very serviceable, decent running back. I like him. Tiger Shanks, I'm really high on the line. I think he's an excellent player. And then the big guy, I mean, or Kaleo rather, Balunge at tight end is just gigantic. I mean, I think he's like 280 or something like 6'7", 280 somewhere in there. I could have the height wrong, but I know it's right around 285, 290, and can come out and make some plays in the passing game, and obviously can get the job done blocking for them. Just a well-rounded tight end. I think he's going to be one of the better tight ends, especially in our region, kind of trailing off from QC and Ferguson up at Oregon, and then you got a little drop off after those guys. But I think Balunge could be one of those guys he was definitely in my top 12. I think I had him at like 9th or something like that, ranked as my tight end. But really a good body there that in space can, if he finds a spot in the zone, can also make people miss. Obviously, he's going to be a tough guy to bring down. So I think the offense will be fine. I don't see too much. They got a lot of weapons on offense. Again, the question mark is the quarterback play.
And Dane, before I let you take over, sorry for interrupting you, but one thing I should have shouted out was they also have 4 starting offensive linemen returning. So with everything Steve just said, I wanted to throw in that caveat. And then same question to you, Dane. Anything you expect out of this offense? Any players you want to highlight?
Well, along the offensive line, Tiger Shanks. I mean, you just mentioned the 4 returning starters along the O line, and I think that's key. I mean, you can overcome somewhat poor quarterback play with strong offensive line, especially if you're going to run the ball more than you're going to pass. If your quarterback's throwing interceptions and you have a good offensive line that's able to move the ball on the ground, get first downs on the ground, it should really open up your rest of your offense, especially if you have a quarterback that needs a period to adjust to the different talent level, or just needs a simpler system so he's not forcing throws into bad areas and resulting in interceptions. But I'm looking at their schedule, and they can beat anyone on this schedule. I don't see any team here. I mean, maybe Boise State. Okay, the game at Oregon State might be tough, but they're non-conference. They start the year off at Houston. I think they can beat Houston. I would pick them to beat Houston right now. They go to Kansas, which is also probably going to be a tough game, but that's a winnable game too. They host Syracuse. That's probably one they should win. And they go to Utah State and Oregon State. They go to Hawaii. Traveling to Hawaii is never easy. So, and they also go to San Jose State. They got a little bit of a tougher schedule in the Mountain West, I'd say. So the deck is a little bit stacked against them. They also don't have pushovers in non-conference. I mean, you're going to 2 Power 5 schools at Houston and at Kansas, and you're hosting another one with Syracuse. So that's a pretty difficult schedule. And I just imagine if the quarterback plays up to their internal expectations, where he comes in right away and runs the system the way that they want him to, how many games could they win? The question is the quarterback going to be good enough? let's assume that it is. If the quarterback play is good enough, I mean, they could win 9 games again.
And you talk about the schedule, and I know we'll get into that a little more after defense, or maybe we won't get into it because we're getting into it now. But Fresno State's at home also, which helps. But then that Fresno State game comes off a bye after Kansas, and then they've got was it Utah State, I think, on the road, or Syracuse. They play Fresno State, then they got the Syracuse game, then Utah State on the road, along with Oregon State on the road, and then Boise State to follow. So that's a tough little stretch there. And Boise State, obviously, I think Boise State's probably the class of the Mountain West this year, maybe by a good little bit, perhaps. But Boise State also in that game coming down to Las Vegas. The Broncos are coming off a bye too, which doesn't do any UNLV any favors there. So it's kind of I think UNLV's got their buys after Kansas, so before that little rough stretch, and then after the Boise State game before they go to Hawaii, they got a bye. So it's kind of that little stretch between their two buys. I think whatever I said it was, a 5-game stretch could kind of determine a big factor in it, because that's a pretty brutal stretch on their schedule.
Yeah, and last year, I think with their 9-win season, I think they did have a win over Air Force in Wyoming, if I'm correct. That's off the top of my head, so that could be wrong. But they did have 2 notable wins. It might have not been those 2 programs, but pretty sure it was. But as you guys were touching on here, so we got Tiger Shanks. You also got Jalen St. John, who could potentially be an NFL prospect at left guard, and really just a wide variety of playmakers all over this offense. I mean, so it should be interesting to see how it plays out. You could even throw maybe I think we pretty much touched on all the main players, trying to see if we kind of forgot everyone else. Now, it looks like we got all the main guys in offense. Ricky White, a receiver. Again, Matthew Sluke at quarterback. Talking offensive tackle, Tiger Shanks, and Jaden Thomas at running back are probably going to be the 4 names to remember. I know Steve threw a couple more out there. Dane hopped on the schedule. But, yeah, those are probably analyst-wise the 4 guys to look for, at least in the preseason. Moving forward here, as Steve touched on, we're talking about the defense. Barry Odom is a defensive-minded head coach. Last year, they allowed 28.6 points per game, ranking 89th in the nation. Do you think he can take his D to the next level this year?
I think the D will be improved. I think they're going to be good. They got a lot of good pieces on defense, and they got key cogs in each of the 3 kind of sectors of defense. You're in the front. Up front, they've got Jalen Dixon, who's a beast on the line. He can do a lot of things. Jackson Woodard at linebacker is bona fide. I mean, top notch. I think Dane touched on him earlier. I've got him as, I think him and Simpson are at Boise State are by far the 2 best linebackers in the Mountain West, and I think both of those guys are within my top 4 of the linebackers in the SuperWest of the 25 schools we cover. And then at the back end, they got Cam Oliver, who's a solid DB. So, I mean, you got those 3 kind of anchors in place to kind of help everything else. And I think their secondary should be pretty good, and they'll make plays and force some turnovers, because that's what they did last year too. Even though they kind of, think you touched on the yardage and some points and stuff, but they did force turnovers and get stops that way. And that was kind of the key to them winning some games. So I think the defense will take a big step. And I think Odom is I mean, it's going to go up just because I think that's, obviously he's a defensive minded coach, like you said, and they'll take a jump every year, I think, especially this year.
Yeah, and for me, I mean, I'm not really sure about the defense being better or not. I think the key to the season's success will be the offense continuing to put up points. And I like Jackson Woodard. He's one of the best linebackers, I think, really in the country, certainly in the West Coast. I mean, he had over 105 tackles and is just, a linebacker that can change a game like that. You can really build around. UNLV has, I read this morning, UNLV has never been to consecutive bowl games in the history of its program. They've never been to consecutive bowl games. And so I think the likelihood of that happening this year is pretty strong. And for me, it's not so much on the defensive side. I think it's on the offensive side, maintaining and potentially improving from last year. The defense is what it is. What you said, 88 points or 88th in the country in points allowed per game. Yeah, that needs to be improved. But even with that, they won 9 games. So I think the success of the season is not really going to be on the defensive side of the ball. It's all going to come down to the offense.
Yeah, definitely offense is going to play a huge factor. Obviously, quarterback is such a pivotal element, in football. There's no other way to really say that. But looking at the defense holistically, they do have 7 returning starters, 3 of them earning all conference honors last season. On the defensive line, Jalen Dixon was all second team, all Mountain West Conference selection. Sorry if you just said that, Steve. I'm just kind of making sure I don't forget anything myself. He's gonna on the other side. He's got Antonio Doyle Jr., who's a transfer from FCS Jackson State, and Texas A&M. So they got some players on the line in the secondary. You already touched on Cameron Oliver. They also have a couple Power Four transfers. Jalen Catalon, who played at Texas for 1 season, and Arkansas for 4, and Malik Chavez, another transfer from Arkansas. So you got some big time Power Four players back there. Maybe make a mark in the Mountain West. That's still got to be proven though. Respect the Mountain West. Just because you're transferring in from a big conference doesn't mean you're going to have success. And I want to make that clear. You still got to work hard. Let me stick to defense. You heard my rant. You heard my rant going a little off there. And then yeah. So bottom line, I already touched on the secondary, and we'll just like Dane said, there's a lot of wait and see, and that's what we're going to do. We're going to wait and see. Moving forward here, but actually, one final caveat again: 7 returning starters, and 3 of them all conference. That should be something. Should be something. Moving forward, it will literally be impossible to replace kicker Jose Paisano. We never talk about kickers like this, but he earned the respect. Going 26 for 29 last year. He made 4 in a 3-point win over Vanderbilt, and he was 6 for 6 against Colorado State in a game they won by 2 points. So, guys, I read the stats for a reason. This is going to be a simple question before we get to the schedule. Do you guys think, bottom line, he's not going to be Pisano, but can he make the 1 or 2 kicks that really matter this year? It's a Chittenden.
I mean, I think he was 18 or 19 and 22 last year. I think in high school on field goals, and he had a long of 57 yards. So he's got the leg to get it done. I mean, it's a kind of we're back to that quarterback thing. I mean, it's tough to replace somebody who was that good. And Paisano made big kicks, and he was clutch and everything. But yeah, I think they'll be fine with kicker. I think they've got a good one there as a freshman. Obviously, it is a freshman, so you never know what could happen with nerves and the big adjustment to college. But obviously, a big leg. Obviously, a lot of good pedigree from his background, and I mean, I see no reason why he won't be able to get the job done.
Yeah, they also have a pretty good punter, too. It helps on special teams when you have a punter that can flip the field in every single punt. I think he averaged 46, 47 yards per punt last season. So if you're taking a step back potentially with your kicker, the punter is really going to have to step up because, field position is key. And so you might not have the best kicker this season, right, with this replacement, but we'll see. We'll see. And but I think the punter can help out, too, on special teams.
Yeah. I mean, I'm gonna say he goes 1 for 2 in what I feel are the big kicks. So I think he's gonna win a game and lose a game, and hopefully bounce back as he matures through the years. So I talked for 7 hours on the next question. So bottom line, however you want to phrase it, how many games do you think they'll win? How good do you think they'll be? And do you feel they could potentially win the Mountain West?
Well, I'll let you start with this one, Dane, if you want, or I can take it. It's up to you.
Oh, yeah. Okay, so I like to go when I analyze a team's upcoming season. I always look at it as a momentum thing. So, what do you think is going to happen in the first game? And in the first game, especially on the road against a Power Five team, can really define the rest of your season. So, if they lose to Houston, then I'm not quite sure what their ceiling is going to be. I don't know. They might not get to 6 wins if they don't beat Houston. If they beat Houston, then I'm assuming they're probably going to beat Utah Tech at home. So you're going to be 2-0 going into Kansas on a Friday night on ESPN. And that game against Kansas could really define the rest of the year. I don't think they're going to beat Kansas, but if they did, the rest of the season is just completely different. But, I think they might lose to Fresno State. I think they should beat Syracuse. The Utah State game on the road is an interesting one for me. That's a toss-up in my mind. I don't think they beat Oregon State in Corvallis. Don't think they beat Boise State at home in Vegas. They probably beat Hawaii. They probably beat San Diego State. They probably beat San Jose State, and they probably beat Nevada. So whatever that adds up to, 6 or 7 wins possibly. But I think that they have potential. I like the pieces that they have. I think that if they win against Houston and they keep it close against Kansas into the fourth quarter, this team could be better than people are expecting. And I don't know if they could get to the Mountain West Championship game again, but they've got to be one of the favorites to get there. Probably top 3 or top 4 at the worst in the Mountain West.
Yeah, I think they're easily top. I would say top three. I mean, I think Boise State is again a cut above everybody else, and then I think it could be kind of Air Force and UNLV kind of battling it out for that second spot in the championship game. They don't play each other in the regular season, so that's one thing there. I'm looking at like 7 wins. I think 7 wins is kind of almost the minimum, and I guess it could fall to 6, but I'm looking at 7. That's what I'm thinking. Now I think the upper end would be 8 and maybe 9 in the regular season, but I think 8 and if they go 8-4, I think it's great. 7 wins is where I think they'll be at, and I think that middle section is really the tough one. I mean, it's a tough one, and I think that could kind of decide because, like you said, Dane, as you went through the schedule, the bottom 4 games are all games that they should win. I mean, they should go 4-0 in that stretch. The only thing I could see is if in that middle stretch they don't play well against Syracuse, they drop one of them against Fresno State or Utah State. Obviously, Utah State's got a lot of flux, and then lose to Nevada or to Boise rather, and then even the Oregon State game. I think they can beat Oregon State uh, up there, but either way, that's neither here nor there. But I think they could win that game. But let's say they don't. Let's say they in that stretch they go 1-4 or something. Then where are their heads at for those last 4 games that they should win? So that's kind of could be a killer stretch, but I think they'll come out of that with at least a 3-2 or 4-1 mark in those 4 games. I think so. That's my guess. I'm looking at 7 or 8 wins.
Yeah, and I feel like some UNLV fans, players might be upset by that win total. This is still at least I feel this is a better team than last year. Their schedule is just a lot harder. And in regards to that Oregon State matchup, Steve, I think they could win that. I think many people would actually agree with you. I think Athlon had UNLV ranked like 60th or 60. It was in between like 60th and 62nd, maybe. And then Oregon State was down like the 80th through 82nd range. So they have the talent to play. It really goes back. We obviously had to do a full show and talk about full things, but as Dane and Steve have alluded to many times throughout the show, it does come back to the quarterback. It comes back to the offense. And if Sluka can come in or perform, or one of the other guys wins the job, which I feel is unlikely, this team could be dominant. But until that piece is answered, it's hard to answer when you got Mikey Keene at Fresno State. You got Boise projected to win the conference, and Air Force with their amazing, their unique system. So it's going to be hard. Those are kind of the 3 other teams. I'd throw Fresno State in there with you guys because they got Malik Sherrod, Mikey Keene. They also return a lot of offensive linemen. So that should be the top 4 in the Mountain West. This year, I've heard some rumblings. Maybe you got people high on Hawaii with Braden Shager returning, and possibly Colorado State with Fowler Nicolosi and Torrey Horton. But the bottom line, the 3 that you guys said, plus Fresno State would be Boise State, Air Force, UNLV, and Fresno State. Would kind of be the top 4 this year, projected by most analysts, I'd say. And then is there anything else that you guys would like to add about UNLV? We can go to the Mountain West because I just touched on that a little bit, or just the whole college football landscape in general. There's a lot going on right now.
Yeah, I'll take UNLV. So I feel like this program is on an upswing. It gives me similar feeling or a vibe to Arizona. I think it's a program that maybe hasn't had as much success as they would want over past 20 years and even longer. But something feels like it's shifted, and I think it's the transfer portal has really helped them, and they've been smart with taking SEC players and maybe some Big Ten players and putting them into their system and getting them developed, and they're producing on the field. And so when you have something like the transfer portal, you can change your program pretty quickly. And I think UNLV has done a great job of that. I mean, you just look at Jackson Woodard. I think he came from Arkansas. And now he's one of the best players on the West Coast, and he just led his team to 9 wins, one of the best seasons in program history. And so now you have momentum, and when you have momentum like that, it's sort of belief within the program, and so people work harder. In the summer, people are training harder. They've in games when you get down early, suddenly you think we can still win. We're not giving up. We're fighting to the end. And like last season, these field goal kicks were key for them in key games and key moments. And so you have a culture where you believe, you think you can win, and that the culture, the mind state shift is almost more important than anything else because it lifts the whole up. The whole team becomes better. It's not just the players, it's staff, it's support people, it's everybody with a new belief. And we're talking like this Las Vegas Sun article projected 6-6. I bet the coaching staff and the players saw that article and were genuinely angry that they're coming off 9 wins, one of the best seasons in program history, and they got all these players returning that are some of the best in the West Coast. And 6-6 is a projected record. Like I mean, they should beat Syracuse. Like if they can't beat Syracuse, then what I'm saying right now, I think, maybe I need to take a step back and rethink what my impression of UNLV is. But I think this season could be special. There's something brewing in Vegas, and I think we should all pay attention. That's why I called this podcast, because just my mind is telling me UNLV is a team to watch this season.
And I agree, and it starts with Odom at the top, and that's why I don't think there's going to be a huge drop off no matter what personnel is in there, because I think he can get it done. And you talked about the SEC transfers, especially from Arkansas, and I mean that's where he came from. He was the defensive coordinator at Arkansas, so he had Jackson Woodard in at Arkansas with him for a couple of years before he came to UNLV, and then Jackson followed him to Vegas. So you got those kind of connections. Obviously, he was at Missouri. Had some successful runs, ended up right around 500. But Missouri in the Big 12 at that time was a tough spot to win. But he even got them to kind of a newer height as well. So I think they got the right guy in Vegas. And like you said, I think you said it best earlier too, Nick. When the team's not going to be much worse than last year, but the record might not be the same. But it's just because it's a tougher schedule and there's more expectations, so people could kind of be down. But yeah, this is a program. They're going to go to a bowl game this year, so that they're going to get the back-to-back bowl games. So that's going to be off the charts there. So that'll be good for them. Duplicating 9-10 wins, maybe not this year. Especially with like we said, kind of Fresno and Boise and some other teams that are really good in the Mountain West, and the bottom half of the Mountain West is actually getting better too. I mean, Nevada's got some coaching changes. I think Choate could do some good things down there. Hawaii, there's still some issues there, but obviously Timmy Chang's got a good offense in place, and Schrager's a quarterback that can run that offense. Colorado State, I think, might have the opposite problem of UNLV. They might have some players, but maybe the coaching's not there like it should be. But that's just me, and maybe that's another show. But yeah, no, I think UNLV. I'm expecting 7 wins. I don't see any much of a drop off from last year. Maybe win total, sure, but the program is building and it's going in the right direction. And I think Rebel fans have good reason to be excited. I think Dane is kind of emphasizing the excitement that Vegas fans should have. And I think they do.
One last thing I want to say, the schedule, there's 5 games on Friday. And so almost half of the season is on Friday. And I think the coaching staff has to prepare and adjust for that. So, I mean, Friday is it's weird to play on Friday. I know with the new TV contracts, Friday night games are becoming more popular. But as a coaching staff, you have to recognize that and plan around it. Whatever you got to do to make your players in the right mindset on Fridays to play those games, you got to. And if that means changing practice, changing schedules, whatever it is, you got to be ready for those Friday games and embrace it. If you become the type of program that can excel on a Friday and you have 5 Friday games, that's the margins we're talking about that can make a difference. I know we mentioned, a new field goal kicker. Well, the coaching staff can help adjust some margins by whatever they got to do to get their guys ready to play on Fridays. It's unique to play 5 Friday games. That's something that instead of taking it as something that's a hurdle for them, use it as an advantage. Make it so that those Friday games will be you. You will own Friday, and put that into your culture. Friday night games, we are going to win every one of them. We're going 5-0 on Friday this season. And I think something along the coaching staff lines of getting their team to buy into that is going to be key.
And this podcast has already gone long enough probably today, but we can have a whole podcast on Friday night games too, and I can give you my opinions, but they should really go 0-0 on Fridays because no college football team should be playing on Friday. It's freaking ridiculous. Give me Thursday, that's fine. Wednesday, sure. Give me action on Tuesdays, but Fridays high school football, leave it alone.
Yeah.
Hey, I like both you guys comment. We have got the Friday take and the anti-Friday take. I'm staying neutral on this one. Those caught me off guard. And so anything else I want to add? Just again, I know probably a lot of UNLV's top players: Ricky White, Jackson Woodard, Matthew Sluka, Tony Grimes. They're probably all watching this. They're like another kind of set of people are picking us to be, I think Steve gave the high point with maybe eight wins. You said potentially 9 if all things go right. I'm gonna stay with that 7 wins kind of. I want to say 6 wins to be honest. So guys, come back, prove us wrong, and that's what sports are about. There's a lot of potential for this team. So really interested to see how they perform. But again, with just that top 4 in the Mountain West this year, I do think it's going to be really, really difficult. But again, the talent is there. And Sluka, if you come and ball out, you could be talking something special. So in closing, hey, Steve, sorry to throw you on the spot. Did you have the name of the player who unfortunately passed away in a accident last night?
Andre Seldon. Andre Seldon was a player for Utah State that was cliff diving and had a incident in the water and didn't resurface, and they found his body Saturday night around 9:00 Utah time, I think. So that's a sad note for the Mountain West.
Yeah, and previously he played at New Mexico State, and I believe Steve told me off air he'd transferred in from Michigan before, so he's really been all around this college football community. And it's unfortunate whenever you lose a young man, a young kid out there doing what he loves. We lost some of the bigger players at bigger market schools, and I just hope this one gets covered as well. So it's unfortunate. Rest in peace, and prayers to you, your family, and the football family in the Mountain West community. It's a easy day for no one. So in closing, sorry to end on kind of a sad note there, but want to pay our respects. It just gives us maybe a reminder of how lucky we are to really do this show and just talk little ball, because you never know in life's when something unfortunate is going to happen. So thank you guys for watching SuperWest on Sundays. We should be back a few more times in the off season. We don't really know, but we're going to figure it out. But you can plan to see us on a weekly basis during the regular season. We release the show on Sundays, if that wasn't clear in the title. College football season is seriously creeping around the corner. In about a month, the games are going to be back. The new look college football, the Big Ten, the Pac-2, the ACC, the SEC, the Power 4. It's all new, the 12-team playoff, and it should be, after maybe a little frustration, it should be a hell of a lot of fun this year. So signing off for Steve and Dane, I'm Nick. See you guys later, and deuces.